welcome to Stop Now. I'm JK, your host for this week talk show, and I'm joined by Amar, my teammate. Amar, welcome. And we are quite excited to introduce, we are missing our teammates, other hosts. Nate is the main person who does this. But anyway, I'm trying to back up and uh, though we have run through the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month last month, but still we are continuing with that because of our Stop Now mission is to bring in awareness and educate people on human trafficking, various forms of human trafficking, and how to prevent and how to support the survivors and also the victims to get the help. So in that, we have some special guests here. You all know that we have a partner with Eyes Open International, and Harold D'Souza is the main man, hero of the show, and we welcome him back again. And also the special guest, Suleman Masood. Am I saying your name right?
Yes.
Welcome to our show, Suleman. Would you do the honors to introduce yourself? Then we can jump into the topic.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me. My name is Suleman Masood. I've been working in the anti-trafficking field for about a decade now. Much of my work has been working with local, state, and federal agencies, so whether they're nonprofits or they're government entities. Really, my goal and focus has really been centered on providing awareness and creating more opportunities for male survivors of human trafficking, whether it being sex trafficking or labor trafficking, and then also working specifically with labor trafficking survivors. What I do now is I currently sit as a council chair for the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. So the United States Advisory Council is made up of 11 council members that are appointed by the President of the United States to provide recommendations to the President's Interagency Task Force, as well as the Senior Policy Operating Group. So these are basically the agencies that oversee a lot of the policy for the executive branch, and much of the policy and protocol that's created that's related to human trafficking, whether it's through service provision, whether it's through awareness, whether it's through financial stability, etc. Our goal on the council is to help provide recommendations in ways that the organizations can better identify, can better provide services, and then for those agencies that work with law enforcement to better find ways to investigate, to create more arrests and further prosecute and hold those traffickers accountable.
Well, that's wonderful. Again, Suleman, I'm new to this. I have no lived experience. That's where I wanted Harold to help me out here because I don't know how to talk to even victims, or I'm just learning, right? So as I was in the part of nonprofit and in the mission-oriented organization, I got introduced to this, which I was not aware of human trafficking at all before. And surprisingly, how do we sensitize these things, right? My problem is only the victims can understand this and able to, because I'm trying to be a devil's advocate here and ask some hard questions, if you don't mind. Because, thank you for that. And because I'm still struggling to understand how a male adult can become a victim of this kind of exploitation, and what the government is doing on this and why they are not able to prevent this.
Yeah, these are good questions. Because for many service providers, whether they're in the United States or abroad, I think this is a common question that many individuals have when it comes to labor trafficking, as well as for male survivors as well, for male victims. So I'm going to give two different examples. The first being an individual that comes into this country, right? They may be a non-citizen, but they may be coming on a visa, right? They may be working in their home country. It may be Mexico, it may be Canada, it may be overseas in the Philippines, etc., right? Maybe India as well. But in one instance, you have an individual who's recruited, or they may be getting messages from somebody from the United States, who may be hired as a third-party contractor or somebody that's brought in to represent a company, okay? And they are through communication, they're looking to recruit and bring in workers. And there are many different industries involved, right? It could be the tech industry, it could be restaurants, it could be working in agriculture and farm working, it could be construction, etc., right? Or hotels, right? But in order to recruit and bring an individual, they may be providing false promises, right? In my culture, my family is from Pakistan. So in the South Asian culture, and I think South Asians across the board, right, understand that for males are expected to be the providers for the family. Males are expected to hold a job, a steady job, and be able to provide an opportunity. If a male or if an individual is given the opportunity to come to the United States to work, even if it's off of false promises, for them, it's a solution to help provide income to their family, to send money back home, right? We see this with all of our families who may identify as non-citizens coming from different cultures and backgrounds, right? For me to come to the United States, this is an opportunity for my family. This is an opportunity for me to provide. This is an opportunity to give a better opportunity than my family currently has, because the jobs that exist in my home country do not pay as well as the jobs that exist here in the United States. So if an individual is given the opportunity to come to the United States, they're seen as, the lottery winners or the lucky ones, right? And again, it can span different industries. Now, the job circumstances, the job description surely can change, right? Based off of all the false promises that employer or that manager or that person that is recruiting somebody to that job may be, right? So they may have provided in a job description, right? A regular job description, right? This is an opportunity, and they may be contacted through WhatsApp or through social media. This is an opportunity to come. This is how much it pays. You're going to be provided housing. Here are visa options, etc. Right? It may be just a generic job description. When somebody takes that opportunity, right? They're not aware of what's going on. They're not. There's not necessarily a vetting process. The first 3 months, or even the first 6 months, or even the first year, the labor conditions may be good, right? They may be an environment where they meet other workers, they meet other colleagues, they're able to do the work, and really, they're taught to, in essence, appreciate and build trust with that employer. But those traffickers obviously have a different agenda. They have a different motive, right? Their job is to exploit as much work through force, fraud, and coercion, and to squeeze out as much work and labor out of that individual as possible, and pay them little to nothing as a result of it. So, to answer your question of the why, this is just one aspect of it, and I'll give another aspect in a second. But the why comes from the need to provide. The why comes from the need to represent the family, the cultural expectations put on the individual, whether they identify as male or female, right? When they're in the United States and they're in a position to provide for their family overseas, that's for some, that's the cultural expectation. So even if they are subjected to forced labor, they're subjected to harsh conditions, they're subjected to conditions that do not provide personal protective equipment when they're handling maybe toxic materials, right? They're willing to endure that for the sake of protecting their family and being able to pay their family. Now, the other aspect may be the coercion may have started from the beginning. There may be an individual that may have had a prior existing relationship with that individual or that individual's family, where a debt is placed on that person's head, and saying that, based off of whatever happened in that prior relationship, if this person doesn't pay X amount of money, then that person may harm the individual or may harm the individual's family, right? So if that coercion is provided up front and it's given up front, that person may feel in their mind that they have nowhere to go. They have no choice but to work for this individual or to meet the demands of that individual. Now, when in looking at both of those examples, the reason why many survivors stay, and I will say in the context of male survivors, and even in those survivors that identify as coming from a different culture or cultural background, or may identify as non-citizen, is the stigma of shame, feeling ashamed, right? For male survivors specifically.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll stop there.
No, I just wanted to pause, right? So you have a valid reasons, right? So I understand from the victim's point. So just to be a provider, or to help the family or for themselves. I'm not judging here like being right or wrong, but the problem is, then how do they maybe Harold can help me out in this, right? So even Harold came in a legal visa, and also it continues to be exploited. Those visas are. So that is one of the reason I asked this question. Like, so all those people like who are in that and trapped, and we all know that like how the industry is going on, as you mentioned, right? The recruitment industry itself, right? Recruiting people in whatever may be the fraud methods, they justify that like it is boosting the economy, and like thousands of people are laid off now, right? And if they are on visa, as you said, right, they might be indebted, like they have to pay loans, they have the shame to return back to their country to survive, like they just get into this trap of labor trafficking, right? Is that
You're right.
right?
You're right. And the thing is, even if especially with the way the United States economy is looking now, and even the global economy, right? As we have seen after the pandemic, so many companies started laying off people, right? And maybe losing a labor force. That puts that individual at an even higher risk of being subjected to re-victimization, especially if they left a harmful work environment, an exploitive work environment. If there is not a means for them to provide for themselves and also provide for their family, they may be subjected to work under the table at a different industry, or work for a different employer that may be just as abusive as the previous one.
So that's the whole point, is like, then how is it possible for them, like for the victims, to get justice against these big corporations? Like we hear stories, like many people call us and report that like, yeah, I'm being exploited, but we just don't have solution, right? They say that like we are even forced to pay the employer money to run the payroll, to stay in the country, and we are surprised to hear those things. But why can't the government take action? Because it is the government visa that uh, pro- providing the opportunity for the employers to exploit these conditions, right? So as you are in the US Advisory Council, like I'm asking you this question, right? So
Yeah.
you guys like debate, discuss about these things, how to provide solution, and what kind of policies can be implemented?
Yeah, I can say one of the biggest gaps in services for a nonprofit organization, for a local, state, and federal government entity who's trying to who's working with persons that have visas, or maybe people that don't have a legal visa, or even U.S. born citizens who may be subjected to forced labor or exploitative work practices. The biggest gap seen is that those entities, those agencies, are not making sufficient contact with those workers. The tips that they receive, right, and the issue that they have as far as identifying what labor trafficking looks like, the federal government, state government, local government, still having a hard time understanding the hot spots of where that occurs, and also making sufficient contact with those workers who may be in those exploitative practices, engaged in, being a victim of those exploitative practices. Even when those tips are provided, or even when somebody is calling a hotline, there is not enough being done for those tips, or for those hotline calls or those conversations to be investigated. So law enforcement really needs to get a stronger education, because in this country, historically, when people thought of human trafficking, they would only think of sex trafficking. So subjecting somebody to forced sex or commercial sex. But labor trafficking has been around in this country for generations upon generations upon generations. It's been at the root of the United States founding, right? Thinking through on, Native American, indigenous communities, as well as African American communities who are subjected to slavery as well as forced labor practices. It's been in this country's foundation. However, if we're looking at the present time, law enforcement is still having a struggle to understand that forced exploitation that converts to forced labor, and the difference between the two is that force, fraud, and coercion element. right? And unfortunately, I think when a lot of these federal law enforcement would look at labor trafficking, they would look at it from wage and hour theft. They wouldn't equate that to human trafficking. And wage and hour theft has a much lower penalty for corporations or companies that are in those practices compared to holding a company accountable when it comes to human trafficking. So unfortunately, we're in a space right now, fortunately and unfortunately, we're in a space where law enforcement is now starting to understand what those patterns and what those hotspots and what those industries look like. But now we're working, I think all of us who work in this movement are now working to challenge those federal entities and understanding how do you make contact with somebody who is subjected to forced labor? How can you not only work with them when they're sharing their victimization, because they're not going to be able to articulate what labor trafficking is by the definition, given cultural, language, education barriers, but in whatever they are able to share, how can you piece that together, be able to work with other employers or other maybe individuals that work within the company that are aware of those harmful practices, and then how are you able to then move through investigation, and which could hopefully lead to prosecution?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Harold, I don't want you to feel left out, right? So you can also jump in and share your thoughts. So tell me that, like, because we are trying to do an experiment and find out like how exactly this labor trafficking happens, and through that social experiment, we are trying to expose the corporate practices, though it's not like an Hindenburg research and shaking the grounds of big uh, richest man in the third richest man in the world to down, like we all know that story, right? So we are not going there, but still all the big corporations are involved in it, and I can name those things, but I just reserve it like right now, like for our conversation. Harold, help me out, right? As such, like we discussed about it like a lot. From your personal experience, though you were on a legal visa, when you make a complaint, right, it is tied to Department of Labor, right? So as Suleman was mentioning, right, it's a wage and hour theft, and it's always tied to money, right? Even if I make a complaint saying that like I have been victimized, so they direct you to Department of Labor to file a complaint there, and they just investigate saying that okay, whether you have worked, you have been paid or not, and they don't care about your legal status, because the minute you file a complaint against your employer, they are going to withdraw your status and you become illegal. And how does that haunts you, right? So surviving here for so many years and then becoming a US citizen, so I just want to share your experience so that people can understand and have the courage to come out and say, because many victims, they say exactly the same thing out of shame, right? I cannot report it because my family will see this as a bad thing, and they just want to move on with their life, even though they are exploited and subjected to harsh conditions.
Yeah, thank you, JK. And first and foremost, I really appreciate what simple living, high thinking Suleman Masood has spoken. And I would like to even welcome Amar here from Bangladesh. But coming down to the point, JK and my friends' audience on Stop Now, is that number one, you have to understand the psychology of human beings. Whether you're a girl, you're a boy, or you're a LGBTQ. So even male, even male persons like me or like Suleiman, we have emotions, we have feelings, we have sentiments. We also have a heart like a girl. We can cry. So you have to understand that we all human beings are equal. We cannot differentiate between a lady, a man, and even a person who is an LGBTQ. That's number one. Number two, I always said that many times we victims surrender, we keep quiet and they commit suicide. So always I tell that suicide or silence is not a choice, option, or solution. Like what Suleiman said and what you said, JK, is that 20 years back, I came legally on an H-1B visa. I became a victim. I fought. What happened? My case went to the US Department of Labor. I won the case after 6 months. But it was like what Suleiman said. They thought it is a case of wage theft. I was trying to communicate to the investigator, but I didn't have the proper words that do not send the notice to my employer, because if he gets the notice, I'll be kicked out. And that is what happened, right? Because they never understood that it is a case of human labor trafficking or debt bondage. My trafficker, what happened? What was the consequence? My trafficker hired a guy to kill me, right? My wife's case went to the Wage and R division. Again, they thought it is a case of wage theft. My wife won the case, I won the case. But I want to share here, like you said, in the white collar industry, like a lot of multinational company, I know a lot of people here in US who are working, like in case the salary officially on paper might be like $152 per hour. There's a middleman who appoints an immigrant for say $32 an hour, right? So again, that is a wage theft because he's giving his services. These big companies, they give contracts to these companies and they appoint these people and they get exploited. That's one. But I always believe that everyone should be aware. Education is the key to the solution. So if there is solution, there is resources. Number one, the basic rights. The United Nations has got those rights, the 30 articles. No one is aware. Many American citizens or many human beings on this planet or in worldwide are not aware of the 30 human rights. Like the Article 4 is no slavery. So I'll be very honest. I myself didn't know much about this 30 articles. After I came back to the US, I educated myself. I learned. And I created my own solution. I fought. Many times victims surrender. Like you said, yes, they are being exploited. Laws have been made by the United States of America. Like Suleman is on the advisory council at the White House with Joe Biden. We give recommendations and advice. They give that. Congress does implement that. It takes time. They have put law in place. Like, okay, anybody invites anybody from Pakistan, Bangladesh or India on an H-1B visa or a work visa, it is the responsibility of the employer or of the person to take care of that person. So it is a basic human rights that they expect them to do the sponsor. Like I was in a conference on January 26th at the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Summit 2023 at Columbus. Suleman was the keynote speaker. You'll be shocked. When you have kids, it is understood that it is the responsibility of the mom and dad to take care of the kids, of their lodging, boarding, value, character, education, faith. We don't expect the government or outside people or NGO to come and take care of my kids. It's a moral responsibility. So same way in this particular case of people coming legal, it is a moral responsibility of the sponsor, but people are exploiting. You will be shocked, JK, and my audience who's watching, that many times kids are victimized by their own parents. I could not digest that. Suleman is like example, not his personal example, but we have seen so many people that mom has put her own daughter into sex trafficking for maybe whatever reasons, for drugs or anything else. But this is a fact. So we have to accept the reality and become more smart. I'll give another living example. Is the war going on with Russia and Ukraine? Now the agents in India have become so smart. I'm working on that because I work with the law enforcement agencies in India and in the US. Because America is the destination, but country like India is the source. To cut the long story short, these agents in India are taking close to $100,000. Remember, 80 lakh rupees, which is a big money. You can retire in India itself. These people are paying the money, flying to Ukraine, getting married to a vulnerable girl in Ukraine. And Canada welcomes refugees or people from Ukraine, and they enter Canada legally. They get divorced and they sneak into US. See, we have to be one step ahead. It's not that the US government or law enforcement agency is not working, but today I'm very happy and proud to say, I think Suleman will agree with me. He does a lot of presentations. We have done a lot of presentations together. Today, the Wage and R division, the US Department of Labor, law enforcement agencies, police officers, nurses are being trauma trained, are being trained on how to identify victims of human labor trafficking or sex trafficking at an early stage. Not only that, I did a very big presentation in January at the US Department of Education. So where a bus driver, school bus driver, and administrative staff, a PTA parent can identify or recognize a student who is going through something, a victim of maybe his parents or her parents are going through some problem. Maybe it is labor trafficking or sex trafficking or even LGBTQ. Thank you, JK.
Yeah, I have a question to Harold. Suppose if anyone went to US by H-1B visa, and after that, the company who sponsored his visa and they fired him from their organization or job place, and he is living as an illegal way. He did not come back to his own country, and he's now living to US. So if that man caught by police or any other law enforcement, so how your organization, ISOP International or any that you are working, they will support the man or the people?
See, Amar, this is a very good question. In the United States of America, whether you're legal or illegal, I never like to use the word illegal, but I'm saying if you're undocumented and if you're walking in the streets, if you're a human being from Bangladesh, China, like Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, if you're walking on the streets and not done any crime, police, even if they stop you for any reason, they are not going to get you arrested, handcuffed, jailed, or deported. They might just ask you some few questions, because as far as if you're not broken the law, you're not done any crime, they never hurt you. Understand, people scare you, the traffickers and the perpetrators or the employers. Oh, they don't like brown skin people. Oh, you lost your job, you don't have status, so you're going to prison, you'll get deported. That's a threat they're doing to the victims. But in reality, a police officer, you go to a police station, you tell them, sir, I don't have a status, my employer kicked me out of the job. He'll just say, okay, sorry, I'm very sorry with you. I might give you $10 or $20. People do that, officers. But he's not going to get you deported. I'll give my own example. When I was going through the situation, I went to the in the federal building, and that was the deportation center office. I didn't know because I was so lost. And they said, this is a deportation center. Why are you here? I said, no, somebody told me like here, they're going to get me. Well, no, we're not going to get you deported. Can you imagine? I went to my US Department of Labor head, I don't know give his name, when my case was going on. And I was so scared. And there all these people around me who were trying to threaten me from my trafficker side, you're going to get deported, you'll get jailed. So I went to the chief. And what tells me, Harold, every day I get calls that at the construction company, so-and-so immigrant is working. He was giving the example of Mexico's. Well, we listen to them and we just keep the phone down. Means in short, understand one thing, Suleman is here from the White House. Everyone knows that there are immigrants working in the US who are undocumented. It's a fact, but they're not here to hurt you.
And if they're subject to forced labor, those federal, if it's specifically DHS, so Department of Homeland Security, if they're working on a case that involves a company that's hiring non-citizens that do not have a visa, and they were victims of forced labor, Department of Homeland Security will work with those victims to get continued presence. So they do have a legal status here.
Right. And what Suleman said here right now, see, many people, this should be shown on your show and people are watching, that there are resources available like solutions, that is CP, that's continued present status. It's not a visa. CP is a continued present status, and every individual is eligible here, a foreign national, even if he does not have passport, he does not have a driver's license, a state ID, and he is a victim and proved by the law enforcement agency, he is provided CP on the spot. When I say on the spot, it will take a couple of days, but he's entitled for that. And once he gets that, he's entitled for a U visa or a T visa. And then after 3 years, he can apply for permanent residency card. And then he's entitled for US citizenship. This is the path I went through. I came legally. My employer or trafficker, like what JK said, yeah, they discontinue your visa. And that's, where are you then? That same thing happened to me. I was illegal. People told me I'll go to prison. But I fought. I told the judge, take a gun and shoot me. Take me to Times Square and kill me. But I'll die in public, but not in isolation. I'll fight for justice. So we have been threatened and we become a victim. We get scared. We hear what community says, what the society says, and the people around us, around the traffickers, and we get scared. Like how Suleman fought his case, right? Today he's a living role model. We want more male survivors on this platform, because what Suleman said, it's a stigma, it's a shame. It's a fact with me. I was not talking for 10 years. It's not easy joke, easy thing, JK, like what he said. But we have to break these barriers of cultural things. That, oh, why can't men break? Why can't men cry? Why can't men have sentiments, emotions, feelings? We are a father, right? We are a parent, provider, protector, and a person. But we can flip those 4 P's into passion, purpose, power, and prayers. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Harold, thank you so much. Suleman, where do we put the blame here, right? So from my understanding, right? So what Harold mentions, and we all know, even as a common sense, right? We know that like it's not about white people or people in power. They know that this is happening. Then why do they like still allow this non-immigrant visa category, and they just support these big corporates to exploit, continue to, because at the top level everybody knows this is happening because of that. And it is a form of modern slavery. Why can't they abolish it, and why can't they provide freedom to everyone, right? So as you my understanding from Harold saying, right, whether you are, let's not call people as illegal, right? So undocumented, right? If you are undocumented, how are you going to get a job? The work authorization, without that nobody is going to employ you. The minute you are undocumented, they are going to exploit you. How will you survive? How will you pay your bills? Nobody can, nobody will be educated person will not be like traveling millions of miles to come to US as a dream. They don't want like to be treated like homeless people, right? Without pay, like how will you survive here? So without documents, you cannot get a job, a decent job.
But
Everybody
see,
knows this, right? So then who has to be blamed, right? I can blame only the US government.
no,
Well-
JK, I'll just intervene here for a short time and then maybe Suleiman can jump in. Is that, see, we don't have the data, number one. Okay, there are a lot of people who have become a victim in the US who have come legally, like on H1B visa, L1 visa, B1, B2 visa. So many people who come legally on B1 stay back, which they should not be supposed to stay back. That traffickers tell them, or the family, oh, stay back, I'll get you married, I'll do this, I'll get you a status. They don't know. So the actual how we can stop this, I don't blame the US government, because we have to blame ourselves, our own people, that in our own country, that they should not get, many people are ready to do anything to come to the US.
Harold, I have to stop here, right? Again, let's be realistic on this, right? So I'm not saying that like I'm not blaming one side alone, right? So blaming the victim is also fine, right? I'm okay with that. But the problem is, just be honest, right? Even with the Asians itself, right? Even if they are on green card, there is a huge backlog. They say that like it will take 10 years, right? And the same way, even for the victims, right? T visa and U visa, there is a huge backlog for that also. So how do you say that like a world's most advanced country and wealthiest nation keep exploiting by saying that like we have backlog, we'll go through only the procedure? So it looks like the entire legal system and the executive branch is broken. Unless we make noise and point the fingers on them, it's not pointing the fingers on white people, or it's not about white or black or brown. So if we are to move ahead, advance in civilization, in the modern society, we have to accept the fault, right? Suleiman, correct me if I'm wrong. So what is your role, if you can enlighten for us?
What you were saying is valid, but what I will say is this, and Harold had mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation. You would be surprised, again, when we look at the federal level, we look at the corporations, the federal government understands and knows that labor exploitation exists here for citizens and non-citizens, right? Corporations know the same thing, right? But the community, when you bring it down to the community level, you would be surprised how little the community understands about labor trafficking. It is up to those people in the community to continue, as you said, to make noise. When it comes to these corporations, I think the best example I can give around accountability and also acknowledgement of that they have knowledge that labor exploitation exists, right? Is there's a podcast done, the Joe Rogan podcast. There's a man named Siddharth Kara. Siddharth Kara, he has I believe a PhD, but he's been working in the human trafficking field for over 2 decades. One of the things that he wanted to look at and investigate was around cobalt. So we all have cell phones, we all have laptops. Any electronic in this day and age uses cobalt. How do you get cobalt? You have to mine it. Where do you mine it from? You have to get it from parts of Africa, specifically the Democratic Republic of the Congo, right? So in the Congo, there is no labor protection, right? You have thousands and thousands of people mining, and you have a lot of companies profiting off of that. Now, we can make the argument, right, for United States companies specifically. In the beginning of the cobalt mining, a lot of U.S. companies would be there and exploit those workers. And again, they would hire those contractors. It's not like the executives of the company, the CEO of the company would come down to these mines and look and supervise, right? They are contracting out and they're not wanting to know what's going on, right? It's almost like they're hiring somebody and then they're forgetting about it, and then they're just expecting that work and the build of the electronics and all that stuff to just happen, right? Because they're looking, unfortunately, they're looking at profits, right? So the federal government needs to hold a lot of these corporations accountable. Now, when they did that, right, and more information and more noise was created around these cobalt regions, more and more U.S. companies understood, because the general public would make noise about it, led those companies, those U.S.-based companies, to walk away. Now you have some companies still there exploiting those workers in that region, but they're coming from overseas. But what I will say is it's up to the community, and I look at labor trafficking specifically because I don't want people to just think labor trafficking happens with corporations, right? They happen with local businesses, right? And it happens at a community level. What I tell people is that labor trafficking is a public health issue. It is not a federal government issue. It is not a law enforcement issue. What people fail to understand when they look at the optics of the United States is that the federal government, the president of the United States, the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, they're going to come in and they're going to take care of every case. That's just not logical, and that there's no bandwidth. There's no government in the world that can have that kind of capacity. With the United States specifically, it is up to the state level governments, the local level governments, to prosecute those cases, right? Because it happens at local hospitals, it happens at local restaurants, it happens at family-owned businesses, it happens in hotels, it happens in local farm working sectors, right? So the more that those state level officials and those local level officials get a better understanding of what labor trafficking looks like, and they are able to understand where the hotspots are in their local community, and they're able to inform the public and help set up hotlines and set up tip lines to help the public inform what's going on, the more these cases can be prosecuted. And for those individuals that do not have citizenship and do not have a legal visa, right? That's an opportunity for that state level government, that local county level government, to then work with Department of Homeland Security to ensure continued presence is met. Does that make sense? I don't want people to assume that labor trafficking only happens for the Fortune 500 corporations, because that's just not true. In my situation personally, as I am I'm somebody, I wouldn't say one of the few, but I'm somebody who has U.S. citizenship here, but I was still subjected to forced labor. And I was working in regular local businesses, right? I was working under the table. I was working in all these, and even just customer-facing jobs where I'm meeting with customers. I'm ringing their stuff up at a grocery store. I'm working in fast food, restaurants, etc. This was all at a local level. At that point, it would not make sense for the federal government to intervene. This is the responsibility of that state level government, the California government, the county prosecutors, right? As Harold had mentioned, right? Thankfully, I was able to get the help I needed. I was able to report this crime, and the local government was then able to prosecute this case, right? This is the model, whether you have citizenship or not have citizenship, this is the model that local governments need to follow, because it happens in the local communities. It's not the responsibility for the federal government to swoop in and provide justice for every single person, because that's just not how the process works here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree on that. So we had a whole lot of conversation in terms of very serious kind of argument here. Let's lighten that. Like I'm trying to be a little bit funny here, like no offense to anyone, like I'm trying to joke as well. So then how do we protect the victims from law? Because it boils down to even one of our victim, like our board member, he mentioned this, right? Case by case, it goes case by case, and they say that, like, okay, I reported to several agencies, including the FBI, and even called the national hotline and reported to Department of Labor and Justice. I knocked every other door, and at the end, like they said, like if you have money, hire a private attorney and get justice. That's what is happening here, because they really at a local level, if they are denying it, like saying that like only this is a federal case, like we can't handle it, that person cannot go from one state to another state, right? So they just lose hope. What's the big deal, right? So let's move on. And everybody has an American dream, right? Become a big corporate employee and make more money. If you lose the job now, like if you keep quiet, you can again at least go back to the same company if the job market is good, or if you are rehired. But if you break the chain by making complaint, which obviously only heroes like Harold or Suleiman, I don't know your story, but still you seems to be a fighter as well. And I didn't know that like you are from the surviving background as well. So that's good to know, right? So let's cherish some happy moments. I know that like Eyes Open International has been nominated for the award. Just wanted to share the Liberator Award, and the voting is begun. And I would like our audience and everybody who's watching this, please go to this and support us, support Eyes Open International. And Suleiman, I found that like you are also part of this. If you can talk about that, that will be nice.
Yeah, I was recently nominated as well for the Liberator Awards, specifically in the Survivor category. So see what happens. But as Harold knows, I mean, we don't do the work we do for awards, right? The award that we get is providing justice for others and providing opportunities for others. It is, of course, it is a blessing that comes with it. But one thing that I believe anybody can do, it's, you know, anybody at any level, doesn't matter if you work for the government, you don't work for the government. The best thing that I try to recommend for anybody that is looking for a job, and they're looking to make sure that the job is supportive and the job is equitable, and is not going to subject them to forced labor, is number one, you have to look at, when you get the job offer, or even get the job description, you have to make sure when you're working in that job, you understand what your local worker rights are. So there are two rights in this that I look at in this country, right? One is your victim rights, right? So Harold was sharing, right? There are a set of victim rights that an individual can receive, right? So that can be, and that's if the case, if you're reporting your case and your case ends up going to a criminal proceeding, right? That could be the right to restitution, the right to make a victim impact statement, the right to be notified of your case, right? The right to representation and notice. And then the second set of rights, which is before there's any case, before there's any reporting, and at the most basic level, and everyone should have, regardless of where you, what your understanding is of the laws, is to, it's on any website you can Google, but what is the federal minimum wage that you receive, and what is the state level minimum wage, right? If I live in Texas, for example, Texas, I can look up what the state's minimum wage is for working, and then I can look up what is the federal government's minimum wage that they set and they require for any organization doing business in the United States. When you look at those two basic things, and then you can look at from that, as after that, then you can look at what does a healthy work environment look like. Am I in an environment where I'm working with toxic metals, toxic chemicals? And if I am, is my employer giving me gloves? Are they giving me masks? Are they giving me protection so I'm not inhaling these chemicals every single, you know, all aspects of the day? How can that be limited, right? When you're asking yourself these basic questions and you're realizing when asking that there's something missing, right? Those are some of the early signs that you can start looking into, right? And if you feel that some of those rights, because these are the most basic rights afforded to anyone in this country, if those rights are being violated, then this is an opportunity to report that. And then again, it's not just reporting and then hearing nothing. It's also the responsibility of whoever is receiving that information to do something about it, right? So I encourage anyone to continue to educate yourself and educate those organizations and the government, the local governments, to understand what human trafficking and specifically labor trafficking looks like.
That's wonderful. Again, Harold, please make a shout out for Eyes Open International and anything, final comments.
No, nothing. Like, I just say that Eyes Open International is your organization. It is our organization. It is not my organization. I just was doing a presentation yesterday and I was telling that Harold D'Souza is there today, alive. Tomorrow he is dead. But Eyes Open International organization will continue forever in this world to help victims, survivors, vulnerable populations, and community members to live a life with freedom. And like what Suleman said, I'm not here to okay, that I appreciate that we got nominated for the Liberators Award. I would recommend you all do your voting. There are 19 organizations. But whatever Suleman is doing, whatever you're doing, JK, or whatever I'm doing, I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm not doing it for respect. I'm not doing it for reward. Because for me, the basic thing is that I always ensure that my wife and 2 sons are happy. Charity begins from the house. I'm very, very clear fundamentally. And then how I can help other people. And like what Suleman said and what JK and Amar is there in Bangladesh, that every human being on this planet has the power to change the outcome, whatever they desire and whatever they wish. So like, I was a common man, I was a failure and I'm a sinner, I say that, right? But today, look at the living example. Suleman is there at the White House. Amar is there in Bangladesh. Here you are. So I always believe that if we have to make the change, we need to step out. Sitting in these 4 walls, I cannot do anything, So whatever least or most I can do, I'll do a food drive in Cincinnati. There are many things that we have the ability and capability to do that. So we need more people to join this mission, this vision and this passion. Because I always believe that teamwork makes the dream work. There are a lot of gaps, JK. I totally agree and respect with you. I don't deny that. But who will narrow down the gaps? Who will fill in the gaps? It's you and me. I will never ever leave to the NGOs, to Joe Biden, law enforcement agencies, or Narendra Modi back in India. I will step in. Okay, I will give the recommendations. I will fight. I will create awareness in India. So everything has to be done collectively. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a right way to put it. Again, Harold, you have a scripted one, right? You say this like in a very commendable manner. I really enjoy that. So that's why I always want to have you in the show and probably host it. Sulaiman, your final thoughts, how we missed a lot. I think if Nate was there, we would have asked many more questions and also had funny moments. And maybe we can do a part 2, and hopefully you agree to it. How does it feel for you to be in the White House, and what is your future plans and next goals?
Yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor. It's an honor, but it's also a responsibility, right? Being in this position, this is a unique opportunity for me to continue to bring awareness to labor trafficking, to bring awareness to citizens and non-citizens. And I don't take it lightly. I mean, I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy speaking to people and helping them learn and even unlearn, right? And I think for me, what I try to do in my life, I think the pandemic, COVID, I think that's what helped change my way of thinking. But I'm really into unlearning things, right? The way that I learned about what human trafficking is, I always try to challenge those thoughts, right? The way that a system, a government, a community approaches human trafficking, I always try to take a step back and see what is a better way to learn, or what is a better way to approach this topic. For me personally, I'm currently in I am working doing some of this work full time. Then I'm also going to school as well. So I'm currently in law school. So God willing, my plan is to just continue to do what I'm doing, take one day at a time, and find ways to help other people unlearn and find ways that we can work together to combat human trafficking.
Wow, that's excellent. So we have a law graduate, right? It's a lawyer, attorney, future attorney. We need to ask a lot of legal questions, and we need a pro bono here, right, in our organization. Hopefully, we will continue this conversation. Again, I just wanted like to share a few more for our audience. Like again, thanks Harold, like for giving us this opportunity. So again, we have a campaign and we are running a Stop H1B program campaign as well. And I will explain that. And also I'm just promoting Harold Ice Open International and his all his wonderful contribution to the human trafficking world. Uh, these are very important things. Again, though you both are being very humble, recognition is very important. Awards are very important. So I request all our audience to take a moment, go to the Liberator Awards and vote for Ice Open International and also to Suleman. So it's an honor for us. They are the beacon of hope, and with them, like we all can come together and fight to end this evil thing, right? The human trafficking from our world. So with that being said, I will thank you again, once again to Suleiman, Harold, our special guest, and Amar. Thank you again. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.